coffee, that's absolutely fine, no worries. Guys, thank you so much for your questions. It's great to have this kind of format, isn't that, where we can explore this question more deeply together, but the questions you have as well, really, really helpful. We're just going to go through a couple of ones that I guess deal with the context of the passage a bit more and kind of exactly what Jesus is talking about, and then we'll go perhaps into this bigger question a bit more deeply as well, kind of the why bother stuff as well. So, Peter, why would the merchant sell everything he has to buy a pearl he has already found and so already has? Does God want me to sell everything that I have? And then similarly, where was that one about the field? As you start answering that question, we'll go on to the field in a moment.
Thank you. So what I love about question and answer sessions is we can just kind of clear up some of those maybe misunderstandings as well. And I love to hear what people think. You know, you give a talk, sit down, have no idea what anyone's thinking. To have a Q&A means I have some idea what's going on in people's heads. Jesus sometimes did say to people, sell everything you have, give everything away. He didn't say it all the time. But he seems to kind of put front and center the idea of what's often described, what he described as picking up your cross, being willing to be all in. So is God asking us to sell everything? Well, I would say probably not, but in the sense, you know, most Christians have, you know, properties, and we have a house and a car, and lots of us have mortgages and that kind of thing. We do live in the real world. At the same time, there needs to be a willingness to invite Jesus into every area of our lives. Think of it like a house, and many of us have invited Jesus into the front living room, you know, as a guest, but he wants to live in the whole house. But at the same time, I think if you found the other question.
I have, yeah,
right.
yeah. So the other question is to do with the field in regards to the owner, and ask, you know, if the kind of treasure belonged to the owner of the field, shouldn't it be his kind of thing?
Shouldn't he share it with him? So parables are not complete allegories. They are often quite just simple stories that have one main point. And in some ways, the reason why Jesus tells these two together is so that we don't put too much stress on one story and not the other. Yes, probably it would. You know, in our day and age, we would think, surely the owner of the field should have some. You know, we're used to people, you know, being detectorists, and they have to sign an agreement with the landowner and all that kind of stuff. I think that's just that's not Jesus' point. He's got one point, which is following him could cost you everything, but what you gain is infinitely greater. That's the point. So don't go too deeply into, but what about the owners of the field? Because that's not the point that Jesus is making.
Yeah. Really helpful, Peter. I'm going to move us on to, I guess, broad categories around kind of those who've been following Jesus, but perhaps are feeling colder, and ask that question, why bother with that? Perhaps let's start there, and then we can go on to some other categories as well. But this question asks, what if we have decided to fully commit ourselves to Christ for years, but feel as if it hasn't amounted to much? Let's start with that one.
Yeah, the problem is I don't know, I don't know who asked the question or kind of what's going on or what other issues. And life is sometimes complicated. You know, we battle medical issues, and there's been deaths in the family. I lost both my parents, and sometimes life has a bit of a way of kind of going, kind of weighing on you. About 5 years ago, I found myself completely worn out spiritually. So I've been in ministry for now 23 years. Been to Bible college, done all that kind of stuff, but I was kind of running on empty, and I thought I was committed. I think, and it's true in a sense that, I'd already answered the big questions: who's in charge of my life? Jesus is, and all the rest of it. But there was an increasing emptiness, and a kind of like, surely the Christian life is supposed to be better than this. I'm teaching that the Christian life is better than this. Then one day I woke up really early and I thought, sort of twiddling my thumbs, and I just started studying the Bible in a way which I'd not done for a while. Not for work, but personally. And like 2 hours just shot by. I thought, what happened there? And the next day it happened, the next day it happened. And what I discovered was that God was really wanting me to invest my relationship in him, not just about sacrifice and giving up stuff and working for him. And maybe that's why some of us feel quite dry. We feel like we're doing, come on, what's in it for me? What he's interested in is a relationship. And at the same time, I was tussling with the fact that my condition is getting worse. I'm able to do less and less. So I'm able to do less and less for God. But the last 5 years has been like this physically, but this spiritually. Because God has shown me what he's really interested in is my intimacy with him, hearing his voice, loving him. That's what has brought the joy. It was like being born again. And if you want to talk to me more about that, I'm more than happy to.
I think, that is a topic you could open up a whole other talk, or maybe we should at some point to think about
How long
what
have you got, folks?
true joy is, and that sense of that relationship with Jesus that we have, being in the midst of the mess, the midst of the mundane, and actually it transforms everything. It transforms our school runs, it transforms everything, doesn't it? And that can give us that real joy in the midst of the ordinary and the hard as well. A similar question, but perhaps from a slightly different angle. What should we do when it feels like God doesn't bother with us? So maybe that's coming from the perspective of searching Christianity, and actually it feels like God isn't all that interested in us, or maybe that question from someone who's been a Christian for a while, and there's that coldness there, and that question, well, we can bother with God, but does he actually bother with us?
Again, because I don't know your situation, please forgive me if I'm just speaking not at all what you're asking, but my best guess, I think sometimes we can feel that God is not bothering with us if there's something specifically that we're looking for, we don't actually realize it, or we're wanting God to come through for us in a particular way for a particular thing. Sometimes it's a relationship, I've had friends who've been like, come on, I've been single all these years, when are you going to bring somebody into my life? Or it may not be about that, but maybe something else that you're kind of holding out, waiting for God to do something. And I think you have to ask yourself, am I actually holding God to ransom here? Am I saying, I will be happy as a Christian when you do this for me? It might not be that. It may be more related to what we said earlier. But there's a phrase or a verse in a well-known old hymn that says, you can never know the delights of his love until all on the altar you lay. In other words, we can never prove the true delight of following Jesus until we're willing to say, your will be done, not mine. That's called surrender.
That's really helpful, Peter, thank you. And I guess there's that ongoing sense of God, is he bothering us? But also that historic sense of if we're ever doubting God's love for us or how much he's bothered about us, I guess we could just revisit the cross, can't we? There's no clearer sign of God's commitment to us than him sending his own son to die for us. And the person that we see walking off the pages of the Gospels, the compassion and the care that he shows to others, is that same care and compassion he shows to us each and every day as well.
Yeah, so there was another question about how do we know that God has forgiven us?
Yes.
So this was what kind of puzzled me for a while. So when I was, I've got two older brothers, and they were kind of my heroes. And when I was 8, I went kayaking with one of them, and I fell in, and I got stuck in mud in the bottom of this canal, and I couldn't get out, and I was just about to drown. And my elder brother dived in with all of his clothes on and everything, got me out, and put me on the side, ready to change your clothes. The fact that Jesus died on the cross doesn't prove that we are forgiven. The fact that he then rose again from the dead does. The fact that my brother dived into the water doesn't mean he saved me. The fact that he brought me out again does. And so the historical fact of the resurrection means that no matter how I feel, if I have confessed my sin and said, this is true, please forgive me, I can know for certain that it's dealt with.
We're almost out of time, but I guess there's one more question for us to be unpacking. You got that one there. Yeah, I'll let you tackle that one because I know you'll enjoy that one. So a question about kind of the transformed lives that I guess Leanne has been speaking into this morning, and you mentioned a few times as well, Peter. You said Jesus has the power to transform lives, but often we see Christians live the same way as others, or even worse. Isn't this a strong counter-argument? Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, can I say this is a related question. It's something that Lynette and I have been sort of chatting about recently, and because a relative of mine I know kind of feels that the church is full of hypocrites, and people who say one thing and do another. But to be honest with me, to be honest with you, I was surrounded by hypocrites before I became a Christian, and they were non-Christians. I'm not saying that non-Christians are all hypocrites. I'm just saying that we live in a world full of people who say one thing and do another. That's normal. And I was absolutely surrounded by people who always said one thing and did another. But nobody called it hypocrisy. Until somebody became a Christian, then it was. And I found in the church people who were not perfect. I never expected them to be, but there was a kindness, there was a reality, there was a desire to be different. Now, been around the block a lot, and yes, there are people who act worse than nice, good people who are not Christians. But where are they coming from? So being a Christian isn't sort of a flick of a switch and suddenly you're perfect. You never are in this life. So are you starting from minus 50 and you got to minus 40? That's doing pretty well. Or are you minus 6 and you've got to minus 7? That's kind of going backwards, but you're still better than the person who's at minus 40. It's where you are on that scale, but it's very quick to judge somebody and go, well, they don't act like a Christian. And the other thing is to say, and I think this is true, certainly been true in periods of my life, is that when we encounter Jesus, he gives us the option and the power to change. But that doesn't mean to say that we want to change. And just like I said with the house, we may have had Jesus in the living room for years, but until we were willing to actually invite him into the rest of the house and hand over sign over the title deeds to him, there are some things that will never change. There are going to be stuff that we've shoved in the cupboard under the stairs, which are now rotting and smelling, which actually Jesus needs to deal with. But we haven't let him yet.
Really helpful, Peter. And a good reminder as well of what we're doing here on Sunday mornings, that we're not a holy huddle, we're not a membership organization of perfect people. We're messy and broken people coming together, more of a hospital than anything else, reminding each other of where that healing and salvation comes from. I loved your line earlier, Peter, of not an institution or an organization, but we're giving ourselves to someone who gives his all for us. And I guess we're rooting our faith in that, aren't we, rather than necessarily the people we see around us. I think there's lots more questions we have time for. Maybe you can answer that one.
Can I do briefly?
Go on. I'll give you half a minute, Peter.
Okay. It says, why did Jesus come when he did? Why not? Why 33 AD? Well, that was when he died. He came at 4, 6 AD, BC? Yeah. Why not 2000 AD? Why in Nazareth, not in Rome or Beijing or Mumbai? That's a really good question. And partly the answer is I don't know. But in some ways I do, or we can have clues. And first of all, in terms of the when, in terms of time, if you look at the population of the world, it kind of was fairly static until about 200 years ago, and it shot up. So more people are living now than ever before. And so I'm glad that Jesus came before the spike. So in some ways he came at a period of time, but he came also after 1,000, 2,000 years of promises and expectation, so we know who he was when he came. And so I don't know when it's precisely, that's an idea, but where, I've always thought, if the title of my book is Christianity a Western Religion? Jesus came, he did not come to Europe. He did not come to the West. He did not come to Africa or Asia or Europe. He came to a place which is at the crossroads between these three continents, a place which isn't really north or south. And if you are from the east, yes, it does feel Western, but if you're from the west, it feels Eastern. From that central point, he started to reach the world. Thank you very
Let's
much.
sing that snippet of that plan. Thank you so much, Peter. Really, really appreciate it. If your question hasn't been answered or answered as much as you would like, do grab Peter afterwards. He's sticking around. Grab him over a coffee. It's also a chance to pray together as a prayer team over there. You're very welcome just to pray together. If anything has particularly struck you from this morning. One more question I'd like us to explore, and that is the question of how can we find out more? How can we dig deeper into that field and see more of that treasure? We're going to watch a very brief video now about Christianity Explored, which is a great way of doing just that. This is a course that allows you to ask those questions. Who is Jesus? Why did he come?